So OKRs are really important for company strategy and alignment. What OKRs mean, so the three letters stand for objective, and KR means key results. So it's really a structure and a framework of thinking about how do we be clear about the way that we're communicating our goals. So let me give you an example of an OKR. An objective might be, let's expand our product into B2B sales. Now that's a very, very broad goal. A lot of people can misinterpret it. People can have different understanding about what expand really means. And that's why the key results are so important. So the key results could be, we're going to expand into the B2B market by having 50 people of a certain company size in our pipeline, and we're going to close 20 of them and achieve X amount of revenue. So that is like a perfect example of OKR, because you have the objective and you have the KR to define what would it be like for us to achieve it. So let me tell you about a story of the time I helped a CEO when this is her first time implementing OKRs, and her company has actually just gone through a massive layoff. So this is a very high stakes situation because she's already lost trust with her people. And often when I say recovering from layoffs, it takes a lot of hard work, but one of the core things you can provide is clarity. And one of the best ways to provide clarity is through OKRs. So with a lot of emotions swirling around the organization, as you can imagine, people thinking about, what has she done? How did she make this decision? Is she going to fire us all? Where is the company heading? Should I be looking for a different job? We sat down in our coaching session to draw out her idea of what the company overall OKRs should be. I had her do the first draft, and she gave me very generic goals, but really great ideas. So that's like the common mistake that I see with a lot of CEOs, is that their OKRs are not specific enough. You really want to think about your audience. Think about the audience of people who are working at the company who don't have as much context as you do, and you want to make it very, very specific. So we basically workshop her OKRs over and over again until it's really, really clear. And we want to stick with the principle of SMART goals, right? We can even overlay specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely as a framework to OKRs to make it even more achievable by her employees. So once we have the OKRs, we're not done with it yet. We actually need to think about, how do we implement these OKRs? Without implementation, that's really what you do with the OKRs throughout the quarter. Without really planning for it and thinking about it, the OKRs are basically useless, because once you give people a goal, you need to also set them up for success by providing guidance and review and accountability. So after we set the OKRs, we also came up with a very concrete plan to communicate them out and how we're going to set up meetings, processes, and whatnot to make sure these goals get done. That is actually a very trust-building exercise, right? When people are feeling lost, you have something to reunite them, and you have the CEO stepping in to say, I've got you, and I'm going to help you achieve your goals. So let's walk through a high-level design process for how to implement OKRs. So the first step, if you're a CEO coming into a coaching session, is that we're actually going to come up with this OKRs by making them SMART goals. So we would workshop the OKRs over and over again until they're very specific and measurable, and all the things that the SMART stands for. When should we start thinking about the next quarter's OKRs? My recommendation is start 1 month before the quarter starts. So ideally, when you're thinking about OKRs, we're discussing this in a coaching session a month before the quarter. So we've workshopped it. We have your first draft of the company OKRs. The next step is to get buy-in from the executive leadership team. You would bring your ideas of the OKRs and get feedback. Once feedback are received, you would then ask your leadership members to come up with their department OKRs. They maybe have a week or so to think about it, to workshop it, and then they will give it back to you. As the CEO, it is my recommendation that you are the final approver of those OKRs to make sure that all the department ones actually serve the company ones. Once that's decided, I would say you are more than half of the way done in terms of like the company direction. Then you ask your executive leadership members to take those OKRs into their middle managers. And then, as you can see, it's kind of the same loop. Then the middle managers will do their team OKRs. And then given them a week or so, And then the middle managers will take the OKRs to their ICs, individual contributors, to create their goals. So it takes about a month for the OKRs to funnel through the organization. And ideally, at the start of the quarter, you would have something of an all hands. So everyone already has their plans. It's you just sharing the plans again and answering any questions so people can start working. The job is not done yet. What happens throughout the quarter is ideally we're having a checkpoint at all different levels at a monthly basis. So as a CEO, you're mainly hearing from your executive leadership members. So they're telling you how their OKRs are progressing. So then you can decide how your company OKRs are progressing. At the same time, all the managers are doing the same with their direct reports. You can look at that as an example. I've also have some clients who like to check in on OKRs every week with their executive leadership team. Some check a little bit less often, but that kind of time period and having, I would say, at least 2 or 3 checkpoints is very recommended to make sure everybody's on the same page. So I do think one of the biggest pushbacks for OKRs is that CEOs will think, what am I signing up for? If I want to push out OKRs, I have to sign up for all these meetings and all these coordination. Who's going to run the company? And this actually happens a lot, and I see it in a coaching session. So one of the CEOs who had previously implemented OKRs before meeting me, she's been running the process all by herself, and she was just drowning in all the meetings. And her execs were feeling like these meetings are really boring because all they do is look at the OKRs and not really discussing big problems. So after talking with her a little bit, we realized there's actually no one owning the operations function at the company. And it's definitely not the CEO's zone of genius or what she wants to be doing. That is really important because what I had described as a general framework or a way of implementing OKRs doesn't have to be done by the same person. So it's really important to write out all the process and think about who is the best DRI for each part of this process. Ideally, there's someone like a head of operations, a head of people, a chief of staff, or even a COO overseeing the entire process of OKR. So then when a CEO comes in, she's really just worried about coming up with the overall OKRs and giving feedback and then just doing work, right? Execs should also just work on their OKRs, give feedback, and then see if their team is hitting the goal. So then when we separate out the operational component, this is someone who's really good at organization, really good at getting the right people in the room, good at getting people to do things. And then when action items are written down, they're the type of person who chases people down and until they get them done. And then maybe recording all of them in Notion, Asana, Google Docs, someone who's really good at these written communication skills. So if you have someone like that, it is critical you bring this person along their journey before you start implementing. So they are a part of the design of the whole process, and you have given them almost like executive authority over this. So you may bring them to the leadership meeting and say this person's running the process. You may bring them to the all hands meeting and say, hey, this person is running this process. And that would really help relieve the pressure if you decide ahead of time who is going to be driving the operational components of OKR, because as you can see, it's a pretty big process. The next mistake that I see in implementing OKRs is overcomplicating or oversimplifying. OKRs, they're not one size fit all. If you are a 10, 20 people company, I actually would suggest just sticking with goals and making the process really simple, because I've seen CEOs with 10, 20 people coming in with an OKR, one objective, and 12 bullet points. And it's really confusing their teams. When you have so much shared context with all of your employees, everybody can fit in the same room, you know everyone's name, you don't need to put in as much effort to clarify your message. Because let's take a step back. Why do we need OKRs? It helps us communicate. When you are a smaller company, you don't have as much pain in communication, so there's no need to overcomplicate the process. Oversimplifying is on the other end of the problem, right? When we talk about a 500 people company, it is very important to be specific, and for every single person working at the company in the implementation process knows a manager to talk to about their OKRs. Another example of simplification could be, I did see an example of this, of the CEO of like a 600 people company wanting to do OKRs, and all they did was, here are the 3 goals on a slide and all hands, and that was done at the beginning of the quarter, right? Like people are left almost like forgot about that communication. And then at the end of the quarter, the CEO is feeling really pissed off, and he's saying, well, why didn't people do the things that I asked them to do? Well, because the whole process and the goal setting process is oversimplified. In helping people implementing OKRs and other operational tactics, we've learned a lot about operational efficiency. So here's a lesson that we learned. When wanting to implement something like an OKR being an example of it could be a complex operational tactic, right? You have to have the right people on board first. You have to have someone who's operationally driven, who either have done something similar or have done exactly the same thing before, and has like this authority to go all across the organization. When you don't have someone like that, the initiative will fall flat. Think about it this way. You're selling a brand new product / service to your employees. You need a stellar salesperson who's going to follow up and do all of the things. So that internal hire, and sometimes it could be quite a few, 2 to 4 people, 10 people, depending on your company size. That is key. So that is a big lesson. Sometimes the CEO will want to do it himself or herself and have just like a random person enlisted last minute to run the process. It usually doesn't work out very well, and it's painful for people. A success that I can think about in terms of operational efficiency improvement is actually the story that I shared earlier about a CEO who came in implementing OKRs after she's done a massive layoff. So that success is really shown in when she went on to have conversations with her employees. She's starting to hear her words coming out of her employees' mouth. Now, that's a great sign, right? When she's asking them about what are we doing? What is our vision? What is our plan? She's seeing people saying the same things over and over and again. So that's a great qualitative evidence to show you that your message is actually working. So when people started to feel more confident, feel more clarity, and feel more excited about the OKRs and the visions that she's laid out, they're also starting to move a little bit away from the organizational trauma of the layoff and having like positive energy injected into the business. So as a result, I think now they have a really lean team. They're very excited. They're clear on what they need to do, and they have a very bright future. OKRs really help team cohesion. Let's think about it this way. If you're going on a group trip with friends and there's no itinerary, you're at the same place. Every single day, you're going to wake up and text each other and be like, what are we doing today? Where are we going to eat? And it's going to be stressful, and you're going to waste time. And at the end of the day, no one's going to be happy about the trip. Having OKRs, it's almost like creating a massive itinerary for a lot of people on the same trip. It is your job as the CEO to provide a very thorough itinerary, because people are spending most of their waking hours with you and wanting to do good work. So it brings the whole team together on the same trip, knowing exactly where they're going to go, where they're going to stop, where they're not going to stop, and how to work with each other. So a nice story that I can share is really taking the example of a leadership meeting. Before implementing good OKRs, the leadership meeting was free for all. People raised their hand when they had something to say. Other times they were quiet. So sometimes the topic could take 3 hours. Sometimes they were done in like 15 minutes, but things weren't resolved. So the CEO felt like this time wasn't used well. When the leadership time wasn't used well, it's also representative of the team cohesion that's not built there. After implementing the whole process, they saw a significant increase in everybody speaking up. All the team leads will look at their OKRs and report back and say, here's where we're on track. And for the problem areas, this is what we're going to do. And what you're also seeing is all the other leads jumping in and helping out each other. So the CEO is really feeling like he doesn't have to do as much work, right? They're really just watching the whole process build team cohesion. This is all about creating systems and processes that allow people to do their best work. So as leaders, you can step back and just do things that you love.